Janine Stafford. I'm a member of the Interfaith Coalition for Public Education. We are an independent, all-volunteer, grassroots network committed to community involvement in improving the quality of our public schools. You can recognize Coalition members tonight mostly because we're wearing blue. Coalition members, would you take a minute and raise your hands, everybody from the Coalition, so that you know us later this evening. So I want to thank you again for coming to this first of 3 community forums on the topic, Our Schools, What Does It Take? I especially want to thank our moderator, our panelists, and Dr. Boyd for volunteering their time to be here this evening. In addition, the Interfaith Coalition for Public Education is grateful to our premier sponsor and exceptional supporter, the Santa Fe New Mexican. They're videotaping our proceeds this evening. Our co-presenter, the Santa Fe Higher Education Center, and our partners who have been so helpful in promoting this event. Communities and Schools of New Mexico, First Presbyterian Church of Santa Fe Area Home Builders Association, Santa Fe Association of Realtors, Santa Fe Chamber of Commerce, Santa Fe Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the Santa Fe chapter of the NAACP, and Temple Beth Shalom. To orient you for this evening, our time together will be in 2 parts. In the first part, our moderator, Inez Russell Gomez, at the end of the table, who is editorial page editor at the New Mexican, and our panelists will address tonight's question: what does it take to have a high-achieving school? While they are talking, we hope you will use the index cards provided to you on your chairs and write down any questions you may have for the panel. If you raise your hand when you have a question completed, someone from the Coalition will come and gather your card from you. We'll have 10 minutes of Q&A, and we'll use those cards during that time. In the second part, we're all going to work. So we'll form small groups of 4 people. You can just choose folks who are near you. And we're going to discuss 2 questions, and I'll brief you on that some more, but your agenda also mentions that. What the outcome that we want is for each group to write down at least 1 possible community action on the yellow index card that we'll be giving you. And then we're going to ask someone from the small group to present those ideas to the entire room. So as we transition from part 1 to part 2, I'll repeat this process so we're all clear about what we're doing. I'm pleased now to give the floor to Dr. Joel Boyd, our Superintendent of Santa Fe Public Schools.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Oh, good evening. Good evening. Thank you. It feels a lot better when you get a response. Can we give another round of applause to the Interfaith Coalition? So in my line of work, it's nice to show up and allow everybody else to do the work. So I really want to thank you for that. Now, I've had the good fortune of listening to these individuals during the course of my tenure. So they've been telling me what to do. So they're going to tell you tonight what to do. So I'm happy to see Inez here. I just learned this tonight. She was the education beat writer for the New Mexican prior to the establishment of Capitol High School. She wrote the article about Capitol High School being built. So thank you, Inez, for your support of our school district over the past 30 years. One more thing to point out before I take a seat. In Santa Fe Public Schools, we've really been trying to focus on the international approach to education that we're so fortunate to embrace here in Santa Fe. So we have educators from Australia. If you could stand and be recognized. And where's Miguel and our colleagues from Mexico? If you could stand and be. So no pressure, panelists, but you're going to be telling the world what to do here this evening. Thank you, and thank you for hosting this Interfaith.
Thanks, Dr. Boyd. I'm going to turn the floor over now to Inez so she can begin the panel conversation.
Welcome, everybody. It's very exciting to see you and to see so many school board members and teachers and principals and parents. I hope at one of these we'll see some students. Because when we talk about education, a lot of time we're talking at them instead of listening to what they need. So I hope that will change. But it looks like there are some young people, and that's pretty wonderful. Anyway, even though I was the education reporter in the 80s, I still got carded at Santa Fe High School for my hall pass. So I was very young at the time. I have the privilege of introducing a really distinguished group of panelists, because the important thing isn't for us to tell you what to do, but to hear their experiences, because all of these educators and parents up here know what it is to help children achieve. Because I want to take that question, what does it take to have a high-achieving school? Before you can get to that question, we probably have to ask, what is a high-achieving school, and how does one measure it? And I would bet in Santa Fe that we don't think the way to measure it is through standardized testing. And is it measuring where you start and then where you finish, or is it just measuring outcome when some kids are starting on third base and some kids are still on the bus? So I think that's one of the things I hope that these panelists talk about. So we'll start at that end. We've got my list, Dr. Manuel, who's been teacher, assistant principal, acting superintendent, now works with our legislature and is an expert in educational issues. I think everybody probably knows Janice DeVote. She's the principal of Pinon Elementary School. When every parent in Santa Fe was dying to go to a small school and transferring their kids and driving all over town, Janice kept running with 500, 600, 700 kids and doing a great job every single year. And her students are graduates and doing wonderful things. Next, we have someone from UCLA, Jeannie Oakes. And I think that's going to be a really interesting perspective. We have a parent, Cindy Whittle-Hall. She's at Gonzales Community School, and she also has an interest in Native education, which often gets overlooked when we're talking about achievement in schools. We talk about Hispanic achievement, African American achievement, Anglo achievement, Asian achievement, but you don't necessarily care about Native kids. And we have a lot of them in Santa Fe Public Schools. Dr. James Lujan is Assistant Superintendent of the Public Schools, and he'll be talking about what they do to support students here in Santa Fe. What we need the panelists to do is give a 5-minute statement, and they ask that you stand for it. And we'll just go ahead and go right to left now. And we're all going to stand.
Well, good afternoon, good evening by now. Thank you and welcome to Santa Fe. Beautiful place, isn't it? I first of all want to thank the coalition as well, Interfaith Coalition for Public Schools, for your constant support, your dedication, and your passion to education. This could not happen without you all, so thanks for bringing this to the community. We do need to put our heads together. We need to work together. We see books being written as far as school and community and working in partnership, but we don't see the live action that's happening like this. So on behalf of Santa Fe Public Schools, we want to thank you as well. So when this question was presented to me, what does it take to have a high-achieving school? That's a full-packed question. And I know it's an open-ended question, and I know some of my colleagues, if not all of them here on the panel, will answer it from their experiences and from their heart. But the first thing that comes to my mind, and I know it probably comes to yours, is commitment, dedication, and passion. But I want to take my 3-4 minutes that I have, and I want to talk about the nuts and bolts about high-achieving schools. The first thing is valuing teachers. We feel at Santa Fe Public Schools that the value to sustain and to recruit high-quality teachers, that our children here deserve the best teacher in front of them for 6.5 hours every single day. So the nuts and bolts is, how do we recruit, how do we sustain, how do we support, how do we constantly coach as needed these quality teachers? So the magic happens in the classroom. As much as I love principals, I've been a principal before too. Ms. DeVote is an exemplary principal, for example. It's the teacher, it's the investment of the classroom. And so valuing their teacher through feedback, I'm talking about immediate written feedback, meeting with teacher to coach them up. Our model is around the 3 C's, and I'll tell you really briefly about them. The first one is coaching. Coaching teachers, coaching them to be the best. The second one is collaborating with teachers. And the third one is consulting with teachers. But we are all very good at doing the third one. We're very good at telling people what to do, consulting. right? So many of our principals have changed their ways and their directions to actually coach and collaborate, attend common planning meetings, be part of those meetings, give teachers buy-in into quality education, and what does that look like? Each of our schools also has a standard of practice that they have teachers create. It's not given to them by the principal or by the district, but each teacher defines what does a quality, high-quality classroom look like. What should it look like? Should the teacher be working harder than the students, or should the students be working harder than the teacher? Another aspect of having a high-achieving school would be supporting the teaching and learning. Of course, this has to do with teaching, but again, how does this work? It's by making sure that everyone within the building, that we start empowering. So you will start hearing a lot of words as far as involvement, engagement. At Santa Fe Public Schools, we are looking at empowering families, making sure they are part of the learning and teaching. Empowering our teachers, making sure they're part of the learning and teaching. Empowering our principals. I don't like the word principal anymore, but I do like instructional leader. I want to make sure that the expectation for teachers, that the principals don't stay away from doing that as well. So they need to model and coach as well. Also, engaging and empowering families. I've always said, and I've been quoted a few times in the media, as far as learning should not stop at 3:05 p.m. Learning should not stop in the classroom, it should continue, but we can't do that until we empower our parents. I've asked a survey of in my past experiences to parents through a survey, and I said, do you know the reading level of your child? 80% of parents do not know their child's reading level or math level. And if we want high-achieving schools, we need to not just involve and engage, we need to go beyond the basics. We need to actually empower parents. Bring them in, make sure that they know about pedagogy, curriculum and instruction, the strategies that they apply at home, we should apply as well at school. So we have lots to learn from our families as well. And then of course, school culture, it's not defined by what is said, but rather why we do what we do. Why are we educators, and why are we in those positions, and how impactful are we? Thank you again.
My brain doesn't flow as well as his does, so I'm going to read mine. What does it take to have a high-achieving school? For as long as there have been schools, this is a question every community has asked themselves, which in turn has made this a widely debated topic, and unfortunately not one with a one-size-fits-all answer. Each generation of school administrators have responded by redefining school programs, updating curriculum, and improving teaching techniques. Districts have explored innovative ways of offering alternative education by opening magnet schools, charter schools, community schools, and improved upon the traditional school models. However, none of these options are guaranteed. School improvement and reform efforts to date have focused almost entirely on what happens in school buildings and on what school staff can do. However, it's time to get serious about enlisting parents in the education of their children and putting their potential to work as a team with school staff to improve learning and student achievement. This time last year, I remember being in a room with about 200 Santa Fe public school families and students. After months of multiple events went unattended, I was asked once again to discuss programs and opportunities available to this group to help their children in school. I was completely frustrated and worn down in our attempts. I asked families for a show of hands if they would attend a science project health class if we planned one. 2 to 3 hands went up. I asked families if they would attend free online tutoring events. Once again, a few hands went up in the crowd. I ran through a list of events we held regularly that improved student achievement, and each time only a handful of families raised their hands. But I finished with, if we held an event where each one of your children received a free college education, would you attend? Every single hand in the room went up. And that's when I explained it's the same thing. When students know their parents and families are invested in their education, they become invested in their education. Families who are involved and invested have higher achieving children. The upgraded technology, the brilliant educators, the improved curriculum, the dedicated administration mean nothing without parent accountability. It's a complete fallacy for parents to believe schools are solely responsible for the education of their children. Parents must be partners with the school. If your school is not performing, ask why. If your student is not performing, ask why. Go through backpacks, check homework, email teachers, demand excellence. In turn, if a school sees low parent participation rates, it's their responsibility to outline their expectations of their parents. If parents can find a way to attend every basketball game, they can attend a parent-teacher conference. I realize parent involvement barriers are real and must be addressed on a school-to-school basis, but at the end of the day, parents who are involved and accountable have higher expectations for their children's education. In anticipation for this evening's panel, I spent a considerable amount of time talking with friends, administrators, and educators about their opinions of grade schools to be sure I considered all aspects of the conversation. We ran through the gamut of components from accurate assessments of students and teachers, improved social and emotional environments in school, allowing educator independence and creativity. However, each time we came back to the same conversation of parent and family accountability. A school with unlimited resources cannot perform without a continued partnership with parents. Regardless of how much money we raise or programs we offer, a school cannot have high achievement without this partnership. Parent accountability, involvement, and engagement are what makes schools equitable. We are accountable for setting high expectations for our children, and we are accountable to them by ensuring their school provides the tools they can meet so they can meet and exceed those expectations. Once parents are accountable, they become engaged. Parent engagement contributes to a culture of high expectations for all children and ultimately empowers parents to demand high-quality schools for all. Thank you.
I'm Jeannie. I'm from UCLA, but I live in Santa Fe. And for the past 30 years, I have been a researcher of education and especially what makes schools good for the country's poorest children. So I thought one thing I could do tonight is to give you a very quick, a 5-minute summary of what the research says. And if you'd like more information or evidence to back up what I'm going to say, I have in my Santa Fe house books and articles, and I'd be happy to share more information with anyone who'd like it. Well, the bad news that comes out of education research about schools is that there's no specific list of practices or cookie-cutter school design that you can just put into place and you'll have an outstanding school. But in fact, there are 4 things, 4 essential elements that can take different forms in different places, but if these 4 things are in place, you are going to have an outstanding, high-achieving school, regardless of what neighborhood you're in, what your students are like, but these things have to be in place. So first of all, and they're all connected, so you can't really just you think about this as a menu from which to choose, but there are 4 elements that work together. And I'll go through them. One is access, one is press, one is efficacy, and one is relational trust. And the first one, access, is really to the things that cost money. Now, it doesn't cost the same amount of money for every school and every child. These are things that cost far more money when you want to be an outstanding, high-achieving school for poor children. But they're all important everywhere. One is, well, the very basics. You've got to have well-equipped classrooms, libraries, laboratories for kids to do hands-on work, sport and play equipment, and well-maintained outdoor space. Just an absolute basic. High-quality teaching. Teachers who have and can apply in the classroom their content knowledge, their knowledge about how human beings learn, and especially how children learn, pedagogical skills, and importantly, experience teaching. Experience matters. 3, you need a rich, balanced curriculum that promotes deep and meaningful learning, not just a shallow focus on memorizing and prepping for tests, but engaging children in the kind of learning where they not only learn content, but they learn how to apply it in the real world, and they learn that they are powerful learners themselves, and that if they don't know something, they know how to go out and learn more. We call it deep learning, meaningful learning, powerful learning, consequential learning. You can call it lots of things, but it isn't just memorizing facts that you may never be able to remember or to use. Enough time. There has to be enough time. And for some kids who don't live in neighborhoods and families where there's lots of time out of school with all kinds of learning opportunities and supports and resources and tutoring, It means there needs to be more time within the school in rich, wonderful after-school programs or expanded learning programs so kids have an equitable amount of time. Extra help when you need it. Really, really important. And again, this is something that it doesn't come for free, but you get the additional support. So those are the access things. Every school needs to provide children with access to those things. The next thing is press. And it's a press for meaningful learning and positive youth outcomes. Now, it may seem like it's a no-brainer to say it, but high-quality, outstanding schools make learning the most important value in the school. So classroom instruction doesn't get interrupted with all kinds of irrelevant extra things or pulling kids out for this and that. This is about learning, and everybody values that most of all. The second part is that meaningful learning is expected from and thought to be normal for every single child. Not just for some who happen to be the smart ones, but for every single child. And the school has a value for what researchers call a growth mindset or an academic mindset, saying we've learned something in the last 40 years through cognitive psychology and brain science, and that's that intelligence isn't some stuff that you're born with in your head, a fixed amount that doesn't change. In fact, brains are very plastic, and people learn to be smart as they interact with other human beings and with experiences in the world. So the third one is efficacy, and efficacy is about confidence. That teachers believe that they can teach the children who are in front of them. They are absolutely confident that they know how to do this, and they're also supported to learn and collaborate together to continuously improve their skills. So that's efficacy. And the last one, and again, without it, these other things can't be as powerful, and that's relational trust. That every student is known well and feels cared about. And this can be fostered by small learning communities, advisories, looping, staying with kids for the same year. There are lots of different ways to do it, but to have that's huge.
And I'll just give you a little example why. A couple of years ago, I was at some community forum, and when I was at that forum, I happened to overhear a conversation. And mind you, I've been in the district over 40-some years. And with that institutional history, here's what I heard a group of people say about high-performing schools. Low-performing schools, you will see teachers that are not engaged. You will see teachers who are not working. You will see students in the hallway not engaged. And I was horrified, because I thought, that's not what's happening. You're looking at schools based on test scores. And then a group of individuals behind me said, that's why I won't send my students to public schools. At that point, I couldn't keep my mouth closed, and I said, you do not understand the mission of the schools. So I want to, first of all, salute all the schools, because there are caring, dedicated individuals in every single public school here in Santa Fe. The teachers, committed teachers. I have yet to meet in 40-some years a teacher who did not get up in the morning and say, I want to do the best by my children. So that first commitment is the teachers creating an environment where they would be proud to have their own children and their grandchildren. So I need to say that I do believe that's here in Santa Fe Public Schools. So there is a misnomer about high performing based only on test scores. What I like to say when I was thinking about this, and I had much to say that everyone else has said, except I looked at systems. I do think it's so very important that community support the schools in that consistency makes a difference. Consistency in programs, consistency with staff, consistency with the population, knowing that they can come to the schools, have their questions answered, that we face the good, the bad, and the ugly together as a commitment as to why we're here, and that's to raise our children and make sure that they're cared for and they're loved and they're educated. So the consistency in programs and staff is so very important. The other one is about communication and building relationships. When I was preparing for this panel, I did ask some students, and I have to say many of our students are the offspring of many of the students who are grandchildren of students that I taught, and every day I hear someone, did you teach my grandma, really? I don't want to talk about it right now, but I'm so glad you're here. Caring is so important. We need to let every student and family and teacher know that they're cared about, and our school is only as good as if they feel valued and that they're contributors. Everyone at the school needs to know that because of their presence, the school and the community is better off because they're there. I would like to just read in conclusion something that I really believe needs to be communicated to every stakeholder. And this is a pledge we say at our school every day. In this school, we do second chances. We apologize, we forgive, we respect each other, we keep our promises, we never give up, we encourage one another, we laugh often, we belong, we are a family, and for our school we say we are the Pino Eagle family. And I think when you summarize all of those correlates of this pledge, I think that's a summary of what we need to make sure happens in all of our schools. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you so much for inviting me tonight. I work for the Legislative Finance Committee, and we don't just do budget, and we don't just look at all of those entities in just a financial way. We also do program evaluations, and I'm a program evaluator, and because I do have a background in education, I mostly do educational policy. So when we were talking about our schools, I looked at some of our old reports, and most of our reports say that the achievement gap in New Mexico is largely a function of language and poverty. And so I thought, why is that? So I took it upon myself to ask my boss if we could do an evaluation on high and low performing elementary schools. Go out to the elementary schools and see high performing schools and find out what was going on, and then see some schools that were struggling and find out what was going on. These are some of the stats that I was confronted with before the evaluation began. So New Mexico has high rates of at-risk students.
Let's have Principal Devoti, I think.
Is a good one, and for Mr. Lujan and for Ms. Oaks. How do we measure progress without testing the students? And that presupposes you want to do it that way, but basically, what are some other ways to measure progress? Mr. Devoti?
Can you all hear me? Yes. Well, first of all, there are very many different ways of assessing a student and the progress they're making. And by no means do we say that the formal way of assessing them is wrong. It's just we have to make sure we look at many other ways. And that can be through informal assessments. That can be through constant monitoring of the success of the students. It's analyzing and collecting data, looking at portfolios, making sure there are multiple instruments by which we are able to measure that what we are trying to convey is actually being comprehended. And so we also look at that as doing a constant task analysis. We analyze the tasks that we are giving our students. We look to see, is that like backwards planning? We look to see what it is that we want to accomplish and how are we going to make sure that the information we're gathering is not only aligned, but is meeting the individual needs of the students. And that can be done in multiple ways, not just the formal testing.
Oh, okay, sure. Well, I would endorse all that was just said, and one of the things we forget is that when you know people well and you interact with them every day and you're a professional educator, it's a constant process of assessing, judging, trying to figure out where to go next based on what you know. And that's probably the most important assessment that goes on because it's right here, right now, this child, this teacher. But around the country, people are experimenting with performance assessment to replace the old bubble standardized tests. And those are really interesting when kids are given meaningful tasks to do, and then they have to present a product or a performance of their ability to do it, and they present it in front of adults, often not just teachers, but community adults who may be experts in those fields. So the idea is not only what you know and can remember and spit out, but what you can use and how you can apply it. And I think this is a very promising movement in this country. Problem is, it's hard for test companies to figure out how to package it and shrink wrap it and sell it and make a nice profit of it. But it's a wonderful way of adults and young people engaging with each other in real performances of important tasks to see what the students have learned.
So I think Principal Devotee hit on many of the other ways of monitoring learning. One thing that Santa Fe Public School does, and we're very proud of doing this, is that we're in schools every day and we conduct what's called instructional walkings. They are non-evaluative. We go in as a district team and we join the school team and we walk into the classrooms and we look at specific problems of practice that we call. We stay focused on two items. One is student engagement, and two is looking at academic rigor across contents. So we quantify our data and we look at evidence from teachers. If we see that there's needed support, then we give support to that teacher through the principal by allowing the principal and his or her team come up with next steps for it. So again, those are informative ways of assessing quality teaching and learning. So we are trying to change this paradigm of teachers teaching to teach versus teaching to learn. And again, you know, without the input of teachers, we can't give those answers. I mean, we need teachers at the table, and so we strive to do and get better in that every day.
I'm going to go on to the next question, which will be for all the panelists, and we'll start on the end and come up. And so maybe pass the microphone down. And this is actually a really hard question. It's uncomfortable to even read it. But I think this is a really important one to talk about openly. Is there something in New Mexico culture that hinders quality education? And as a person who grew up here and attended Las Vegas public schools in one of the poorest neighborhoods in the state, in fact, when they did the quality education report that Think New Mexico did a few years ago, they took my elementary school, North Public, as the most miserable looking school to be on the cover. And when I went there in 1960 to 67, it still looked the same as it did in 1915. It's much nicer now and called North Star, so it's very beautiful. But I think this is a really important question, especially in a town where so many people move here from somewhere else and honestly come here and judge us and look at us and say, gosh, you guys are slow and stupid. And you don't say it like that, but that's what people think, in my opinion. So I think that's an important question. I think because you're from Taos, you can have some good insights into that. Somehow you got educated, didn't you? Stand up.
That is a very difficult question, and I hear that, and I do have my own opinions, but I'm here on behalf of the LFC, so I need to be very politically correct. I am from Taos, but I'm a product of my parents. My parents were the first in their families to go to college, so I was a second generation, and I was told since day one, which college are you going to go to? So it wasn't a question that I was going to go to college, and I'm an only child, and my parents are very, very aggressive. And if I brought home a 95, it was a tragedy at my house. So I was destined to, you know, go to college and go to graduate school and all of those things. But what I see from coming back to New Mexico, I lived in Dominican Republic for about 8 years. So when I hear poverty in New Mexico, it's nothing compared to living in Dominican Republic. But having said that, I really think it's what I said, a lack of educational opportunity. It's not that our kids can't do it, it's just that they don't have the opportunities that some of us have. Even just traveling, you know, I see my own 2 sons, and just the opportunity to live overseas in another country and speak another language and come back to New Mexico and speak perfect Spanish. You know, I grew up with what's called Tao Spanish, Northern New Mexico Spanish, Spanglish, a different dialect. It's like almost like old Spanish, because when I studied in Spain, my teacher said, "Why are you using words from the 16th century?" And I said, because my family came here in the 16th century. So, but those kinds of things, you know, and so many of our children are interlingual. They don't speak Spanish properly or English or their native American language or English. So we have to find out what's going on in our communities and change that. We can no longer make excuses. When we did this study, when we went to low-performing schools, I heard principals say, well, our kids are poor, our kids don't speak English, we already know that. So what are we doing to change that? And we need to replicate the Piñons, the Anthony Elementary Schools, one of the poorest schools. If you go down to Gadsden, New Mexico, you will see some of the poorest neighborhoods in New Mexico. And Anthony Elementary School is a blue ribbon school with 100% free and reduced lunch and making a difference. They don't have a school that's below a C. And you know, most of their schools are at an A level. So it can be done if we have this concerted effort and collaboration.
Well, as a newcomer to New Mexico, it has been very interesting to look at the education landscape here. And two things occur to me. One of them is a hard answer to the hard question. And I think that is the pervasive remnants of the racism and bias that has so much linked race, ethnicity, and language to intelligence in this country. So a general belief that the capacity is not there in so many New Mexican children. And I think until we get rid of that, and it's often implicit, it's not necessarily hostile, in-your-face attitudes, but it's pervasive in the culture. The second thing is that it costs more money to provide the opportunities that poor children need and children who've been suffered the harms of racial discrimination, and in very tangible ways. If you think about what white, middle, and upper-class families do, not only do they have schools that are very well funded, but when their kids need something that the school's not provided, they live in neighborhoods that make it available, or they buy it with their own money, whether it's tutoring or lessons or extra time on this or that. And so when you think about neighborhoods and communities that are full of children from low-income families or from families that are not educated themselves, it just costs more money to provide all of the resources and opportunities and experiences that more advantaged kids have. And it's true, I mean, we do have an achievement gap, but underneath that achievement gap, as Madeline says, is this huge opportunity gap, both in the way we think about children's capacities and the opportunities we provide them.
I actually don't find this to be a real difficult question at all because we're faced with this every day with the program I work with, Santa Fe Public Schools, Native American Student Services. The majority of our problem with our families and in getting our children in our program to recognize their abilities and take advantage of the programs and services that are already here in the schools is that they have a natural, inherent distrust for organized education that goes generations back. And so when we are trying to work with our children, it's all about establishing trust. It's all about establishing the ability to work with the families and get them to understand that we are only there to support them and to support their student. The other thing is that, and I know that everyone's touched on this, is I think we do have a culture in this city and in this district of the status quo is kind of okay. You know, get that 20-year pension and retire and you're just set. I think that we need to up the ante. If we set the expectations here, and that comes from the school, that comes from the parents, that comes from the community, then they will rise up. If they think the best they can do is go get a job here, that's all they're gonna do. So we have to set those standards. Again, this is a really difficult question because in the sense that I don't want to speak for some other group that I don't really work with all that often. But we have to have an attitude of raising the bar for our students. And that really, I'm looking at another PTA parent that we work together. We had an evening one night in our small PTA group at our school, and we were looking at just talking, and looking at our particular students. And we drew from all kinds of backgrounds. Some of us were, living paycheck to paycheck, and some of our parents had much better incomes. But every single one of our students were high achievers. And there was about 20 of us in the room, and we realized that really said something. And it's because our students knew we demanded that. Our students knew that we had a relationship with those teachers in the hallway when we would show up to volunteer or do whatever we needed to do that day. And that's what I mean by raising the bar. The kids need to know that we're involved and we're invested. Thank you.
So I agree with our panelists here. This is a fairly easy question in my opinion as well. What hinders quality education other than lack of access and opportunity? And that's something I know that our district and the city of Santa Fe should be very proud of, opening and expanding for student choice and family choice. We do have school alternative choices for students, twilight schools, different alternative programs. But that being said, the number one reason in my opinion why it's hindering quality education is because of lack of sufficient funding. That's the bottom line for public education. It's the lack of sufficient funding. I was a former principal in one school in Albuquerque. I spent 19 years there. I was the richest school in the state. I was awarded a school improvement grant. That means $2 million per year for 3 years. Does money help? Yes. Is money the answer for quality education? No, but it helps. It helps when you put it to use. So I had 5 instructional coaches, I had 2 assistant principals, and yes, within 2 years, not 6, 8, or 12, within 2 years, there was a huge improvement in proficiency levels in reading and writing.